5 criminal defenses. 1, mistake. 2, necessity. 3, duress. 4, diminished capacity. Actually, it's 6. 5, infancy, and 6, intoxication. All right, these are easy. Mistake of fact is a defense if it negates the mens rea. For what kind of crimes? Oh, yes, specific intent. And what are they? The violent crimes, murder, robbery, burglary. The inchoate offenses, attempt, conspiracy, solicitation. The 4 theft crimes, embezzlement, larceny, forgery, and false pretenses. A mistake of fact is a defense if it negates the mens rea, but only for those crimes. Okay, what's a mistake of fact? This is where we have some sort of mistake of fact, like you think you're giving them Tylenol, but you're actually giving them poison. Okay, mistake of law is almost never a defense unless it negates that specific criminal intent. You honestly believe the law allows you to do it. Okay, a mistake of law. So whereas a mistake of fact would be you get a killing by poison and you thought you were giving them Tylenol, a mistake of law would be you're a landlord and you mistakenly believe that the law allows you to use self-help in evicting your client. That's a mistake of law. So those two will negate a specific criminal intent. If it negates the mens rea, a mistake of fact or law can be a valid defense. I repeat, a mistake of fact or law is a defense for specific intent crimes if it negates the mens rea. One more time, a mistake of fact or law is a defense if it negates the mens rea for a specific intent crime. Okay, what's our other mistake of law? The fair notice exception. The accused did not have fair notice of the law because it was underpublished, or they relied on that's right, incorrect official interpretation. The fair notice exception. The law is underpublished, it's new, or the accused relied on an official's incorrect interpretation. Okay, moving on, defense number 2, necessity. Remember, justified criminal conduct is not subject to punishment. That is the necessity defense. So our rule script is the defense of necessity means that justified criminal conduct is not subject to punishment. What are our elements? 3, defendant's action was taken to avoid significant harm. 2, the harm caused was less than the harm avoided. And 3, the defendant didn't create the situation. Okay, necessity. Rule number 1, the defendant's action is taken to avoid, that's right, significant harm. 2, the harm caused was, that's right, less than the harm avoided. And 3, the defendant did not, that's right, create the situation. Okay, so elements of necessity: avoid significant harm, harm less than harm avoided, defendant didn't create situation. Okay, next up, duress. Duress means another person forced the accused to commit the crime. So there's a threat, just like in contract law and with wills, there's a threat. They threatened the defendant with fear of death or great bodily harm. Duress is a defense if another person threatened the defendant with fear of death or great bodily harm. That is our rule script. To succeed on a defense of duress, a third party must have threatened the defendant with a fear of death or great bodily harm. Okay, 2 more elements. Okay, 1, we have the threat. 2, we have no reasonable legal alternative. And 3, we have defendant didn't create the situation. So remember, under necessity, it's the defendant's action is taken to avoid significant harm. The harm caused is less than the harm avoided, and the defendant didn't create the situation. Under duress, we have a threat utilized to force the defendant to commit the crime. There's no, that's right, reasonable legal alternative, and same as duress, defendant didn't create the situation. Okay, can you use duress as a defense to homicide? No. Duress is never a defense to an intentional killing. Duress is never a defense to an intentional killing. What are our elements again? 1, a third party threatened the defendant with fear of, that's right, death or great bodily harm. There's no, that's right, reasonable legal alternative, and the defendant did not, that's right, create the situation. Okay, a diminished capacity is just that the accused suffers from some sort of mental defect short of insanity that makes him incapable of forming the mens rea. Diminished capacity. Defect short of insanity can't form the mens rea. Keep it simple. Diminished capacity. There's a defect short of insanity, and that person cannot form the mens rea. Infancy. If you're under 16, you're tried as a juvenile under the MPC. And finally, intoxication. Okay. Voluntary intoxication. For general intent crimes, what are they? A, bark, if. A for assault, B for battery, A for arson, R for rape, K for kidnapping, I for involuntary manslaughter, and F for false imprisonment. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense to a general intent crime. What about a specific intent crime? Okay, if you can't form the mens rea because you were already intoxicated, that may be a defense. But if you got drunk for, quote, liquid courage, that is not a defense. Voluntary intoxication is pretty tough to prove as a defense. For general intent crimes, it's just not a defense. For specific intent crimes, if you got drunk before and you couldn't form the mens rea, maybe that's a defense. But if you thought about it and then you got drunk and did it, it's not a defense. Let's contrast that to involuntary intoxication. This is when intoxication results from an accident or trickery or coercion, or just a strong response to, say, a prescription drug that you didn't anticipate. This is a defense. This is a defense. Involuntary intoxication is a defense. Why? Because the substance's effect is strong enough to negate the criminal intent, and you didn't do it to yourself. Okay, so involuntary intoxication is similar to insanity. It's similar to the McNaughton test for insanity. The accused, because of his involuntary intoxication, couldn't appreciate the nature and quality of their actions and didn't know the action was wrong. That's involuntary intoxication. Because of their involuntary intoxication, the accused, 1, did not appreciate the, that's right, nature and quality of his actions, and 2, did not know the action was wrong. And that's defenses 1 through 6.